She called his dog filthy in front of everyone, mocked him, dismissed him. But when that elevator filled with smoke and death came knocking, that same muddy dog risked everything to save her life. What happens next will break you. This is a story about the hero nobody expected, wearing fur and a paper medal. Some buildings are designed to touch the sky. Others are built to remind you how small you are. Bradford Tower was both. 60 stories of steel and glass. A fortress where emotion had no place, and control was the only currency that mattered. Alexandra Bradford moved through her empire like winter personified. Every step measured, every emotion buried. 3 years ago, she'd lost her husband Daniel. And on that day, something inside her had frozen solid. Grief became concrete. Love became a liability she could no longer afford. She kept her husband's name, not out of love, but because changing it felt like paperwork. And paperwork didn't hurt. Procedures didn't betray you. In Alexandra's world, control was survival. 5 miles away, Marcus Chen woke to a very different kind of morning. Small fingers, wet dog nose, and a daughter who believed every day deserved pancakes. His apartment was tiny, one bedroom that Lily had claimed. But the walls were covered in her artwork, and love filled every cramped corner. And then there was Duke, part German Shepherd, part mystery, all loyalty. Marcus had found him shivering in a shelter kennel years ago, a dog with scars that told stories he'd never speak. But in Marcus's home, Duke had found something he'd never had before, a family worth protecting. Lily loved that dog with the fierce certainty only a 6-year-old possesses. To her, Duke wasn't just a pet. He was her protector, her best friend, the hero who'd pulled her from the pool when she was 3. And today, she had a plan. Can Duke come to work today? Please. It was a question Marcus heard every morning. But today was different. Today, the corporate fortress had opened its doors, just a crack, to the messy, unpredictable world of animals. By noon, Bradford Tower's pristine lobby had become an ark. Purse dogs in designer carriers. A parrot that wouldn't stop squawking. Even a pot-bellied pig from accounts receivable. It was corporate policy meets chaos. And Alexandra Bradford was about to see all of it. Marcus kept Duke close. The dog had been caught in the morning rain, his coat still damp, dotted with street grime. He was well-trained, gentle, protective. But in Alexandra Bradford's world of perfection, he was about to become a problem. Then the elevator doors opened, and Winter walked into the room. Alexandra's gaze swept across the lobby like a blade, landing on the muddy paw prints, the breach in her fortress of order, and finally, on Duke. She walked directly toward them, each step deliberate, each second stretching like pulled wire. And when she finally spoke, her voice carried across the marble like a verdict. That animal is filthy, for words, said loud enough for everyone to hear. Marcus felt his daughter's hand tighten in his, felt the eyes of dozens of employees watching, and felt something break inside him. Not anger, but sadness. For his daughter, for his dog, for people who'd forgotten how to see past the mud. Mom said, Duke's a hero. He pulled me out of the pool when I was little. Lily's small voice pierced the silence. For just a moment, barely a heartbeat, something moved behind Alexandra's frozen eyes. A crack in the ice, a memory of something she'd buried. She'd had a dog once. A golden retriever named Max. Daniel used to laugh when Max tracked mud through their house. It's just dirt, Alex. We have a mop. But when Daniel died, she'd given Max away. She couldn't look at him without seeing everything she'd lost. So she'd chosen to feel nothing instead. 1 hour. Then every animal goes home. And this, she gestured at Duke without looking at him, gets cleaned before it touches anything else. She turned on her heel, dismissing them all. But as she walked away, she didn't see what everyone else saw, a little girl's tears, a father's quiet dignity, and a dog who knew, somehow, that judgment wasn't the same as truth. The afternoon ground forward. Meetings. Calls. The merger finalized with her signature. By 6 p.m., the building had emptied. By 8:47, Alexandra was still there, alone with her leftovers and her laptop, the way she'd been for 3 years. The executive elevator was private, direct to the parking garage. 60 floors in 90 seconds. She'd made this trip 1,000 times. But tonight would be different. Between the 52nd and 51st floors, the elevator shuddered and stopped. The lights flickered to emergency yellow, dim, wrong, terrifying. She pressed the help button. Nothing. Again. Silence. And then she smelled it. Smoke. Thin at first, a ghost of something burning. Then thicker. Curling under the door seemed like fog. Her heart, so carefully controlled for 3 years, began to hammer. This was how control ended. Not with a choice, but with smoke and silence. 5 floors below ground, Marcus was finishing his shift. Duke waited patiently. Lily drew pictures of dogs wearing capes. It was quiet. Normal. The kind of moment that exists right before everything changes. Then the fire alarm shattered the quiet. Marcus's body moved on instinct, years of training kicking in. But when James Reeves' voice came through the radio, everything stopped. Marcus, we've got a problem. Ms. Bradford's elevator is stuck between 52 and 51. An idea formed. Crazy, impossible, maybe the only chance. Duke knows the elevator shafts. He's been in the maintenance crawlways dozens of times. James's voice came back. Marcus, you can't. But Marcus was already moving. Because when someone's life is on the line, you don't calculate odds. You just run. 53 floors. Marcus took them 3 at a time, his lungs screaming, his legs burning. But Duke moved like he was born for this. Powerful. Relentless. A rescue dog who understood what rescue really meant. The smoke was thicker on the upper floors. Level 45. Level 50. Each breath came harder. Each step felt heavier. But Duke never faltered, never looked back. He had a mission now. Inside the elevator, Alexandra had stopped fighting. The smoke was at her chest now. Each breath was thinner than the last. And for the first time in 3 years, she let herself remember, really remember, Daniel's off-key singing, his terrible fitted sheets, the way he'd looked at her like she was home. I'm sorry, she whispered to the smoke. I'm sorry I forgot how to be soft. I'm sorry I chose control over love. I'm sorry I gave Max away. I'm sorry I became someone you wouldn't recognize. The elevator swayed. Or maybe that was consciousness leaving. She'd never know which. Then she heard it, scratching, above the elevator. Claws on metal. Her oxygen-starved brain couldn't process it. Hallucination, probably. Or angels. Or the last desperate hope of a dying mind. Marcus had pried open the service panel on level 53. The elevator shaft yawned below, a throat of cables and darkness and rising smoke. This was it, the moment that would either save her or haunt him forever. Find, Marcus commanded, pointing down. Find her. Duke didn't hesitate. He jumped onto the service ladder and began descending. Paws finding purchase on metal rungs. Body moving with impossible grace. This was what he was born for. Not comfort, but courage. Duke landed on the elevator roof with a thump that shook the whole car. Inside, Alexandra's head lifted. Was that real? Or was death just louder than she'd expected? Then, barking. Deep. Urgent. Commanding. A sound that cut through smoke and despair and 3 years of frozen grief. Duke was calling to her, and somehow impossibly she understood. With the last of her strength, Alexandra stood. Reached up, twisted the interior lock. The hatch swung open, and there, framed in emergency light and smoke, was a dog's face. Scarred muzzle. Intelligent eyes. Muddy paws. The filthy animal from this morning. Recognition hit like lightning. This was the dog she'd mocked. The animal she called filthy. The creature she dismissed in front of everyone. And he'd come back. Not for revenge, but for rescue. Grab his harness. Marcus's voice echoed down the shaft. Alexandra's hands moved automatically, gripping the nylon straps. Duke braced, 70 pounds of muscle and loyalty between her and the drop. And together, they began to climb. Floor by floor, rung by rung. Every time she faltered, Duke was there, solid, present, refusing to let her fall. Her fingers bled, her lungs burned, but the dog never wavered. And neither, somehow, did she. Marcus met them at level 53, pulling Alexandra on his solid ground. She collapsed, coughing, tears streaming from the smoke, and something else, something that had been locked away for 3 years. Duke licked her hand once. Gentle. No gadai. No anger. Just the simple truth that dogs understand better than humans. Forgiveness isn't earned. It's given. They took Alexandra to Mass General as a precaution. Smoke inhalation, minor, but protocol demanded observation. She sat in the ER bay and watched herself on the news. Heroic rescue at Bradford Tower tonight. The words felt surreal. The footage showed Marcus and Duke outside the building. Lily hugged her father. Duke sat calmly beside them, utterly unbothered by the cameras, the lights, the sudden fame. Because heroes don't do it for recognition. They do it because it's who they are. James Reeves appeared in the doorway. Thought you want to know. Fires contained. Buildings got smoke damage, but structures sound. We were lucky. Alexandra repeated the word. Lucky. It felt foreign, like a language she'd forgotten how to speak. 3 days later, Alexandra returned. The building smelled of burnt wiring and industrial cleaner. Repair crews filled the hallways. Everything was broken. Everything was being rebuilt, including maybe her. She took the service stairs to the maintenance office, not the executive elevator. Not anymore. Some things she was learning you had to do the hard way. Marcus looked up, surprised. Duke's tail thumped once. Lily stopped coloring. The most powerful woman in the building stood in a basement office, and for the first time in 3 years, she wasn't there to command. She was there to apologize. My husband died. I had a dog once, a golden retriever. When Daniel died, I gave Max away. I couldn't look at him without seeing everything I'd lost. Her voice cracked. I became someone who doesn't allow mess, or mud, or anything that might hurt. And then Duke showed up covered in it, and saved my life anyway. Would you and Lily like to have dinner sometime? I owe you more than an apology. I owe you a thank you. And maybe I need to remember how to be around people who don't work for me. Lily perked up. Can Duke come? Alexandra smiled, actually smiled. Duke gets his own steak. The following week, Alexandra held a small ceremony. No press, just employees. Duke sat at attention while she pinned a handmade medal to his harness, cardboard and glitter and ribbon, made by Lily's careful hands. The most valuable award he'd ever receive. This dog reminded me that the most important things in life aren't perfect. They're loyal. They're brave. They show up covered in mud, and they save your life anyway. Her voice carried across the lobby, not commanding this time, but sharing. Not building walls, but opening doors. Then she did something no one expected. She knelt down, designer suit and all, and hugged Duke. Really hugged him. The way you hug someone who's saved your life. The way you embrace hope after years in the cold. Spring came to Boston like a promise. The trees around Bradford Tower budded green. Inside, things had changed too. The lobby had been renovated, and a new policy allowed employees to bring pets once a week. Control had made room for compassion. Alexandra had started therapy, had started running in the mornings, and had adopted a scruffy terrier mix from the same shelter where Marcus had found Duke. She named him Max, after the dog she'd lost, after the part of herself she'd thought was gone forever. On Saturdays, she met Marcus and Lily at the park. Duke and Max chased tennis balls while Lily built elaborate stories about their adventures. Marcus brought coffee. Alexandra brought donuts. They didn't talk about the fire much. They talked about normal things, human things, real things. One Saturday, Lily made Alexandra a drawing. A girl, a woman, a man, and 2 dogs, all holding hands. Or paws. At the top, in careful crayon letters, family is who shows up. Alexandra taped it to her office wall, right next to the merger documents and quarterly reports. And every time she looked at it, she remembered. Alexandra still ran Bradford Tower, but her office door stayed open more often. Her calendar included non-negotiable blocks marked Park, Duke, Sanity, because she'd learned something in that smoke-filled elevator. The things that save you aren't always the things you plan for. Behind her desk hung a photograph. Alexandra, Marcus, and Lily, soaking wet, laughing. Duke and Max had pulled them all into a pond during a July picnic. She was covered in mud and pond water and dog hair. And she never looked happier, because she'd finally learned what Daniel had tried to teach her all those years ago, what she'd forgotten in her grief. What a rescue dog had crossed a smoke-filled shaft to remind her. The mess is where the love lives. 2 years later, the Bradford Foundation launched a new initiative, funding for therapy dog training programs across Boston. The promotional materials featured a familiar scarred muzzle and kind eyes. Duke had officially retired from maintenance work to become something bigger, a symbol of second chances. Marcus now ran the foundation's operations. The single dad who'd mop floors now shaped programs that saved lives. Lily, 8 now, volunteered every weekend, teaching other kids that heroes don't always look like you expect them to. And Duke, the dog once called filthy, once dismissed, once judged, became the program's mentor. Young dogs learned from his calm. Scared dogs learned from his courage. And every person who met him learned the same lesson Alexandra had learned in that elevator. On the wall behind Alexandra's desk, next to Lily's drawing, that photograph remained. Alexandra covered in mud, laughing, alive, free. Everything she'd thought she'd lost. Everything a rescue dog had helped her find again. The foundation helped hundreds of children. Kids with anxiety, kids with trauma, kids who'd forgotten how to trust. And every single one of them learned from a dog what humans sometimes forget. Love doesn't require perfection. It just requires showing up. Alexandra visited the foundation weekly, not as the CEO, not as the donor, but as someone who understood what it meant to be saved. She'd sit with the children and tell them, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let someone help you. And Lily, the little girl who defended her dog in a corporate lobby, now taught other children that heroes come in all forms. That bravery isn't about size or power. It's about loyalty, about showing up, about refusing to leave someone behind. Marcus and Alexandra had become partners, not in business, in mission. The maintenance worker and the CEO, the single dad and the grieving widow. Two people who'd learned that titles mean nothing when you're climbing out of darkness together. On Tuesday evenings, the same day of the week Daniel had died, the same day Duke had saved Alexandra, they met at the park. All of them. It had become their ritual, their reminder, their proof that Tuesdays could hold rescue instead of loss. Duke was graying now. His muzzle showed silver. His steps were slower, but his eyes still held that same steady wisdom, that same quiet certainty. I will show up. I will stay. I will save you if you need saving. And I will love you even when you push me away. The woman who'd mocked a muddy dog was gone. In her place stood someone softer. Someone who understood that strength isn't about walls. It's about knowing when to let them down. Someone who'd learned that control is an illusion, but connection is real. Some nights, Alexandra stayed for Lily's bedtime stories. She'd sit at the edge of the bed while Marcus read, and Duke and Max snored on the floor. And Lily would look at them and say, "We're like a book, aren't we? We all have good chapters now." At foundation fundraisers, Alexandra would share their story. "I judged a dog by the mud on his paws," she'd say. "I didn't see the hero. I didn't see the scars from battles he'd already won. I didn't see that the mess on the outside meant nothing compared to the loyalty inside." And every time, the room would go silent, because everyone understood. Bradford Tower itself had changed. The lobby now featured a memorial wall, not of profits or achievements, but of the heroes who'd worked there. Duke's photo hung prominently. Beneath it, sometimes the greatest leaders have 4 legs and muddy paws. Every 3 months, new therapy dogs graduated from the program. Each one trained in Duke's method, steady calm, unwavering loyalty, showing up even when it's hard. And each handler learned what Marcus had always known. Sometimes saving someone means just being there. Alexandra still went to therapy every week. The work of healing wasn't finished. Maybe it never is. But she learned that healing isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole, about integrating the broken pieces instead of hiding them. She still hesitated before elevators sometimes. The memory lived in her body, the smoke, the fear, the certainty of ending. But now she had other memories too. Duke's face appearing through the hatch. Marcus's voice guiding her up. the feel of choosing to live. The foundation grew. Children with autism found communication through dogs. Veterans with PTSD found peace. Elderly people in nursing homes found companionship. All because one dog had refused to let judgment define him. All because one CEO had learned to accept rescue. Duke's last official visit to Bradford Tower was on a Tuesday. He moved slowly now, his hips stiff with age. But every employee stopped to greet him, to thank him, to tell him he'd changed everything. And in his quiet way, Duke accepted their gratitude, the same way he'd accepted everything else, with grace. When Duke's time came, they were all there. Marcus and Lily, Alexandra, even Max, who'd learned everything from Duke's example. They sat in a circle around him in the afternoon sun, and they told him what he'd meant, what he'd taught, what he'd saved. Duke went peacefully, surrounded by the family he'd built. His last breath was a sigh, not of pain, but of completion, of a job well done, of a life lived with purpose. He'd been a rescue dog, and then he'd become a rescuer, and that made all the difference. They buried Duke in the park where they'd spent so many Saturdays. The memorial stone read simply, Duke, hero, teacher, friend. He showed up, and beneath that, in Lily's handwriting, he taught us that love isn't perfect. It's loyal. The foundation continued. New dogs trained, new lives saved. Duke's methods lived on in every dog that learned to steady a shaking child, to calm a panicked veteran, to show up when someone needed rescuing. His body was gone, but his mission remained. Sometimes Alexandra would sit in her office after everyone left and look at the wall. Lily's drawing, the pond photograph, Duke's memorial portrait, and she'd think, I died in that elevator. The old me, the frozen, controlled, perfect me, died there. And Duke taught me how to be reborn. She led differently now. When executives struggled, she didn't demand perfection. She asked, what do you need? When employees showed up messy, she remembered, this is where the real work happens. Not in polish, but in presence. Years passed. Lily grew into a young woman who dedicated her life to therapy animals. She'd tell children Duke's story, how a rescue dog had rescued a CEO, how muddy paws had saved a life, how judgment had transformed into love. And the cycle continued. Marcus and Alexandra remained partners for life. Not romantically. Some bonds transcend categories. They were family. The family Duke had built by refusing to accept Alexandra's walls, by showing up when others would have walked away, by proving that rescue works both ways. Duke's legacy spread beyond Boston, beyond one foundation, beyond one rescue. Cities across the country adopted the program. Thousands of dogs trained, tens of thousands of lives touched, all because one dog had refused to let mud define him. Alexandra wrote a book about their journey, not for fame, but because she wanted people to know, if you're frozen in grief, rescue is possible. If you've built walls, they can come down. If you've forgotten how to love messy things, a muddy dog might just save your life. When Alexandra finally retired, the new CEO stood in the lobby on their first day. They looked up at Duke's portrait, read the plaque, and understood. This company wasn't built on quarterly earnings. It was built on a Tuesday afternoon when a rescue dog climbed down an elevator shaft. They still gather at the park every Tuesday. New faces join. Children who were helped become adults who help others. Dogs that were trained become trainers themselves. And Duke's stone remains, a reminder carved in granite. The bravest hearts don't always wear suits. Sometimes they wear fur and paper medals. Sometimes they save you from elevators. Sometimes they save you from yourself. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, they teach you that redemption doesn't come from being perfect. It comes from showing up. Messy, muddy, and real. Duke once arrived covered in mud and left covered in love. He once was judged and then became a hero. He once was rescued and then became the rescuer. And in the end, he proved what heroes have always known. The greatest rescue isn't from danger. It's from our own locked hearts. And the key? It's simpler than we think. Show up. Stay loyal. Love without judgment. And never, ever let the mud stop you from saving a life. In memory of all rescue dogs who teach us that being broken isn't the same as being lost, and in honor of every person brave enough to let themselves be saved. This story is fiction, but the truth it tells is real. Every day, therapy dogs save lives. Every day, broken people become whole. Every day, someone shows up covered in mud and changes everything. This story is for them. The real heroes. The ones who prove that love is louder than judgment. And that sometimes the best people in your life have 4 legs and muddy paws.